Half a day, half a day, half a day. Inano si Michael Bavakwa. This is State of the Podcast with Fanachu 2023. Sa hunga dispensa zo debri besongan finana. Este. This video was originally planned at the beginning of 2023 as a way of updating those of you who follow Fanachu, those of you who are fans of Fanachu, and even just random people who would like to know more about it. As to where the podcast is at, the types of things that it offers, some of the things that those of us who make Fanachu possible, we might be thinking about for the future. And so dispensa finetna gimanagad who plane este para Enero para Febrero gestina sakan, around 2 maiguini na tiempo. But a lot of things were happening, things came up. And so eventually sort of decided to put it all together, even as an exercise for myself, as the person who produces Fanachu, who is usually the host for Fanachu, even just as a way for me to look back and see all the things that Fanachu has done, all the things that it's doing, just as a way to kind of even help myself recognize the potential value of this podcast, of this platform, to the larger Chamorro, the larger Guam, the larger Marianas and Pacific community. And so, okay, Fanachu is, if you don't know, lo siempre siempre este, it is a weekly podcast. The Fanachu podcast is normally weekly on Wednesdays at 12 noon Guam time. Sometimes it shifts depending on the schedule and the availability of those who participate as guests, but that is usually the time. Fanachu can be found on Facebook. Episodes can be found on Facebook, on YouTube, and on the Independent Guahan Twitter account. In addition to that, Fanachu, of course, has an Instagram and a Facebook where things are regularly posted. And so before we get into the content of Fanachu, the first thing that we do have to talk about, dispensados esta gifino inglés kalang mazulang plakadzo put este, but Fanachu has a Patreon and Fanachu is sustained through Patreon. Again, Tiantingo, if you don't know what Patreon refers to, Patreon is a platform in which creators are able to be supported directly by a community of listeners and supporters. And so, por ejemplo, Matsotsogi Halami website Patreon. And so this happens through the website Patreon. So patreon.com/Fanachu. This is the page in which people can go and they can sign up for as little as $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. The highest tier is $15 a month. And in exchange for your support, you receive a few different things. And so you'll hear about some of those things over the course of this. So as you can see, 246 people at present are what are called patrons. So cada mes sumapopotte Fanachu. They support Fanachu by making a monthly donation of as little as $1, and some people give as much as $15, depending on how much they can support, and also what kind of content they would like. So, Humanoha para Estina website, if you go to this website, you'll see what are called different memberships. And for each membership, you get access to different things. So for example, for just $1 a month, you get access to a number of things we're going to talk about. For $10, that's the Hugwa tier, you get access to more things. And the final tier is Tulu, $15 a month, and you get access to all of the content. So by supporting at $1, you still get access to a lot of different things. But as you are able to donate more, you receive access to more things. This is new to the Fanachu. We started it Fanachu platform. We started it last year. So now if you decide, so if you choose a monthly support donation, you're charged every month for that donation. If you choose to pay annually, then you can get 9% off. And so, for example, if you choose to, and that means then that you will pay an upfront donation. As opposed to every month, you'll just pay a one-time donation for that year, and you save 9% on that. And so, again, if you do have any questions about how Patreon works, feel free to ask, put in the comments. You can message Fanachu. But one of the things I do want to remind everyone is that when you sign up as a new member, you do get free t-shirts from Independent Guahan as well as stickers. If you sign up for the Hatsa level, $1 a month, you get 1 t-shirt and 2 stickers. If you sign up at the Hugwa level, 2 t-shirts, 3 stickers. The Tulu level gets you 3 t-shirts and 4 stickers. And in addition to that, by signing up for Fanachu, you also get access to deals on merch that Fanachu produces, as well as special stickers. So for people that have been a supporter of Fanachu for a certain number of years, you get a free sticker that you can put on your car, on your laptop to show your support for the podcast. And so let's get a little bit more in depth into what exactly Fanachu is. And so, este. This is another episode of the Secret Guam Podcast. Fanachu este official na podcast para grupon Independent Guahan.
When people talk about decolonization, they're like, oh, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Who cares about decolonization?
My generation of parents that are saying, hey, I don't know my language, but I want my kids to know my language.
Whatever they took away from us is gone.
So these are images that I'm sure you're familiar with, drawings of an ancient society.
Speak to your parents, write things down, record them.
Magellan's naming of our islands and calling us thieves and just that whole discourse. Magellan started to just look like someone who visited a restaurant and didn't like the service.
Decolonization is critical. Political status is absolutely necessary.
Fanachu is Chamorro focused, but not Chamorro only. Fanachu deals with history, language, culture, and the topic of decolonization. Decolonization in terms of political status change, but also decolonization in terms of how to address colonial legacies. Fanachu also has solidarity episodes in which we learn from other peoples across the Pacific and across the world about their struggles for decolonization. One of the things that I do want to highlight is that Fanachu has a very heavy Chamorro language focus. And so this is something that started, Fanachu is primarily an English medium, but in response to our patrons who really wanted more Chamorro language content, we have started to create more Chamorro language content. Chamorro language content, most famously, for example, Nenga, every twice a month, for example, Fanachu releases, hosted by Senor Kin Conception, a long-time radio DJ person, radio host, personality, musician on Guam. So twice a month, sometimes 3, angin man weti at night. Si Senor Kin Conception hanahudjon este na podcast, este na dikiki na podcast, a mini podcast, Cuentos Guahan. And so if you are a Hatsa member, as in you support at least $1 a month donation for Fanachu, you get access to his episodes as soon as they come out. And para este Cuentos Guahan, Senor Kin hapapat sa mega na diferentes asunto, anything from politics at the Guam legislature to Chamorro language revitalization efforts, to the rising cost of living on Guam, to the military buildup, to anything. Whatever is on Senor Kin's mind, as somebody who loves to speak Chamorro, loves to share the Chamorro language, he just puts it into episodes that range from 7 minutes to sometimes 20 minutes. And so after 6 months, old episodes of Cuentos Guahan become live on our YouTube page. Again, if you like something, just somebody who's speaking at length for 7 to 10 to 15 minutes in Chamorro about a particular topic, Cuentos Guahan is a great thing, as I tell some of my language students, to use, to focus on, to just get yourself used to hearing more and more Chamorro. But one of the main things that Fanachu has been doing, and I'm super excited about it, in terms of putting out more Chamorro into the universe is, of course, the uploading, the digitizing, the collecting, and the uploading of Chamorro music. And so, for example, when you go to the Fanachu YouTube page, you will be able to see that as of today, more than 230 Chamorro vinyl songs from the 60s, 70s, and 80s have been digitized and then have been uploaded onto the YouTube page. And so most of them have been divided into different playlists. So for example, Chamolinian Unos and Dos, Guam Serenas, Jimmy D, Joe Timing Low, JD Crutch, Sunedon Cienamay, these are Cienamay artists, Maguf Noche Buena, these are Christmas songs from different artists, Tzatfris Brothers, Alexandro Sablan. All of the Chamorro music is combined into one Pairina playlist that you can listen to, which has 200 songs on it. Sigas and Sidal, Delgado Brothers, of course, Johnny Sablan. And so one of the reasons why Fanachu is set up to take donations is to support people who produce for Fanachu. So Senor Kin receives a stipend every month for the creation of the Cuentos Guahan series, but we also use that money to seek out and to collect Chamorro music in vinyl forms, in cassette forms, in CD forms, and then to preserve it and also to digitize it and upload it. And so we recently released an unboxing video when I was able to get a hold of 100 Chamorro cassette tapes from some random person on the internet. And then we did a unboxing video in which we opened it up and we looked at who are the amazing artists Chamorro artists on the cassettes inside. And so another thing that we started just this year in response to those who follow Fanachu and would like more Finot Chamorro content is that we started Finot Chamorro with Fanachu Dispensazo. And so these Finot Chamorro with Fanachu, these are short videos, and we've been trying out different formats. These are short videos in which basic Chamorro phrases are taught.
Cosinho and Sanganeno Tatlu, lo mas despacio.
Cosinho and Sanganeno Tatlu, lo mas despacio.
So, por ejemplo, these are 5 phrases that can help you keep speaking Chamorro when you're trying to learn. And so, as you can hear from this was me speaking first, saying a sentence, my son Akli'i, who helps digitize the Chamorro records, speaking second, who's 13 years old. So you can hear 2 voices saying it, and then a space in which you can repeat it afterwards. And we're going to keep creating more and more videos like this to help those who want to learn, help those who would like to learn more Chamorro, have more resources for that. And so one final thing that I do want to share is that speaking of Chamorro music, very obvious, but I do want to share this. So my oldest child, Sumahi, began creating this year. karaoke Fanachu. And so once a month, but although we did get sort of delayed because of Typhoon Mawar, once a month, Suma, he takes a Chamorro song, un gof matungo, gof magwaidza, and a kantan Chamorro, and then creates a video with the Chamorro lyrics on it, but also uses stock footage in order to convey the message of the song. So the most recent one, Mas halacha ni este pumaradzu, Ginanas J.D. Crutch from his second vinyl album, Ega Digidi Putfubot.
Maradu magan di telepon sa susunen ni humud igatongu sa mampus dunay man guay danu habu sa mapuru sotahin sinteku mampus dunay man guay danu habu na mapuru sotahin sinteku.
All right. Oh man, Gofzahu, the watermarks, the pixelated images, Gofzahu. Sa tiutunga taimano hasota adzu lo adzu kalengi font ginini VHS na champu. But again, so plenty of things for those who want more music, those who want some more Chamorro language on Fanachu. And so, as I said, Fanachu every month supports a number of people who, so your support through Patreon makes it possible for Fanachu to give stipends to, at present, 7 different people who all create different types of content or do different things for Fanachu. So, for example, one of the things is that not everybody has a chance to watch every single episode of Fanachu. So what we started doing 2 years ago is that we started to create Fanachu highlights. And so my partner, Desiree Perez, takes Fanachu episodes and then creates highlight videos, less than 5 minutes long, featuring some of the major points.
This is something I think about all the time. What are the indigenous words for queerness and all the, queerness is so broad and beautiful and diverse. And if we look at a lot of other Native cultures, there are so many amazing words to describe all the different variations of queerness, all the different names for queerness, gay, lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, there's a lot of words. There's beautiful words like just really that go beyond the limitation of the binary, which is man and woman, even to encompass both genders, all genders, the spectrum of gender, because man and woman, that binary is so limited for identity. And so yeah, what are our words? And it is really hard. And a lot of the words, if we look at it, I feel like are some of them are from our colonial history, our colonial experience. And so you and I were talking, and gela is one word that comes to mind. Gela, was used, of course, to describe like a feminine man, and it can be or a gay person, and it was used in a derogatory way, in a mean way, but it's been reclaimed really by Gumagela, as this beautiful way of it reclaiming and indigenizing, being proud of indigenous queerness, right? And so Gumagela, of course, is an amazing group, a creative collective, indigenous creative Chamorro collective, which started in the diaspora actually, and out of a lot of folks in Washington State. And at the beginning of the pandemic, they had a call for a zine, which was so far reaching. And I'll get into a little bit of that later, but Gela is one word. And then another one is Manflorita, which is also a mean word, can be described, has been described used to describe like maybe a trans person or non-binary person, maybe somebody who identifies as a trans woman, and so it has been used to hurt people as well. I just
Again, and so those were episode highlights from episode 213, Queer Indigenous Activism and Aesthetics, featuring artist and activist Monica Flores. And so these highlights can be found on our social media, on our YouTube page. And so, they're just a great way for, if you don't have time to listen to an hour-long episode, you can catch some of the major points by tuning in and watching some of the highlights. And so, speaking to what that episode about queer aesthetics was about, one of the things that I'm thankful that Fanachu was able to do this year is to amplify queer voices on Guahan. And so we started this year and have released 2 episodes so far of Aguut, Amplifying Queer Voices in Guahan, with Helen Young. And so Helen is a PhD candidate coming out of Aotearoa, and has been working in queer communities, diasporic migrant communities in Aotearoa. And when she moved to Guam recently and she's married to Manny Cruz, who of course is the founder of Fanachu, Dr. Manny Cruz. And so Helen has been putting out a few episodes, talking to queer voices in Guahan. And it was just, and I'm thankful that Fanachu has the chance to kind of to be a platform for these types of voices, to help kind of bring some of these conversations into the forefront, is to offer support for queer people. And as Monica was mentioning in the highlights there of her episode, some of the words that are used to describe queer non-binary communities, sometimes they are colonial. They are meant to be sort of hurtful and damaging initially. They're meant to put down, but it's nice to see communities reclaim them. But it's also nice to see communities grapple with sort of life beyond the binary. Did Chamorros, for example, have that type of existence before, that type of identity? Because it's easy to just say, oh no, all this stuff just came after from when the Americans came, or all this stuff just comes from the States, but that's not necessarily true. And so it's nice to support, and it's nice to see sort of queer activists and artists and allies kind of push these things towards the center of the conversation. And so Sidus Masi to Helen for creating those episodes. And so as we are moving on now, and as we are discussing specific things, I wanted to also share. So Fanachu is available, the main episodes, as we said, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, but through the help of our current sort of audio engineer, Curtis Jewell, who's a PhD student in New York, what we're able to do is also put episodes onto platforms such as Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. And so this has created another way that people can get Fanachu, and it's becoming one of the main ways that people get Fanachu, interestingly enough. And so last week I was looking at the Fanachu's downloads, and so after a year and a half, Fanachu is almost to 10,000 downloads for all of our episodes, which is very exciting. And so I just wanted to put together a little graphic for people to see what are the most downloaded episodes of Fanachu of all time. So there's at present there's about 200 episodes that are available across multiple platforms. And so as you can see here, the most downloaded episodes, interestingly enough, the top episode, a Finut Samoro episode with Noel B. Kidagwa, Tautar Saipan Lo Sumasaga Giza Washington State Pongu Megai Tindingotnya Put I Koturan Samoro. This was a great Finut Samoro episode with Noel Kidagwa, who has a wealth of knowledge about Chamorro history and Chamorro culture. That is the most listened to episode on for Fanachu. Speaking of Agu'ut, the second episode of Agu'ut with Helen Young interviewing Maria Sol Dueñas Marquez. That's the second most listened to episode. And then another episode, this one from last year, militarized gentrification in Guam with Kira Blas, who was a law student at that time, may still be a law student right now, and Matsalik Sindalu, who's been on Fanachu many times. They were talking about how militarization affects housing costs and cost of living on Guam. And then the fourth most listened to episode, Nurturing and Growing Diasporic Chamorro Communities, with Dr. Jessie Lujan Bennett, who refers to herself as a Chamorro diaspora whisperer, somebody who's always looking for ways to network and connect Chamorros outside of the Marianas, create spaces for them. And so always remember that for those of you who don't want to see my face or who don't want to look at grainy Zoom videos of Fanachu episodes, you can always download them. And especially after Curtis works with them, they oftentimes become like a lot more listenable. He cleans them up. He adds an intro and an outro and a little bit of music and sound, and they sound much, much better. All right, so the last few things that we want to talk about in terms of Fanachu. So for those of you who support Fanachu at the Hugwa or the Tulu levels, you get access to the Secret Guam podcast and Radical Readings. These are very fun things for me to make. And so let me just share with you very quickly. So, for example, every month, sometimes twice a month, I create an episode of the Secret Guam podcast. The Secret Guam podcast is about stories that you may not have heard of, stories that come from the margins of Guam history, stories that are sometimes frustratingly sort of abbreviated by colonial powers and colonial narratives. So these are oftentimes stories of resistance. In the past, sometimes they've been Tautomona focused. But the Secret Guam podcast are meant to be kind of underground stories or forgotten stories, largely unknown stories, which then I just bring out in some way to pass on. Sometimes I bring out some of the historical or cultural context for them. So for example, for the last episode of the Secret Guam podcast, it was about in 1700, a group of Chamorros escaped Spanish control to Rota. And it talks about a group of at least 4 Chamorros, men and women, who who were chafing under the yoke of Spanish control that in Guam and had fled to Rota after the Chamorro-Spanish wars are over. And then they hide in the interior of Rota and they refuse to come out. And so when you listen to the episode, though, it's as part of our complicated sort of tragic colonial history, the Chamorros eventually do surrender themselves, but they surrender themselves for a very kind of tragic reason. And if you can see the image in the background here, you can, if you're familiar with agriculture, then you may have a clue as to why they surrendered themselves. And so the Secret Guam podcast are like that. If you wanted to learn what was the last battle of the Chamorro-Spanish wars on Guam, if you wanted to learn about what's it called? How Johnny Sablan was inspired to record Chamorro music. You want to learn about a J.D. Crutch concert in the village of Inarajan in the 1970s. The Secret Guam podcast is a great place for those. And there's dozens of episodes. In fact, there's more than 100 episodes right now that you can watch. For those who support at the Tulu level, these episodes of Radical Readings, these are like mini lectures. All right. Sometimes they are literally 20, 30, or 40 minutes long. And the Radical Readings are just a chance in which you take a text. By text, I mean it could be a book, it could be an article, it could be a photograph, it could be a song, it could be a poem. It could be a newspaper article. It could be anything, but you take a text and then we get into some of the history in it, some of the politics of it, and so on. So there have been radical readings on the defeated Guam draft constitution, radical readings on books by Chamorro authors, such as Julian Uggan's books or Anne Hattori's books, right? The most recent episode of Radical Readings talked about where burial grounds yield the price of movie tickets. And it's part 1 of 2. And in the coming week, I'll record the second episode, in which it's just a long discussion about a time in which the Hornbostel collection, which is primarily in the Bishop Museum now, was created, and how part of that program, there was Hans Hornbostel, who was collecting a whole bunch of human remains, most of which have been repatriated, more than 10,000 sling stones, adzes, and other artifacts. And part of this program was sort of the Bishop Museum supporting that young children could bring in artifacts like this stone adze to the movie theater on Guam in the 1920s. And in exchange for every artifact, they could get a free movie ticket. And so talking about the historical context for this, but then also talking about some of the issues with Hornbostel and what was taken as part of his collection, and then the movements to repatriate or to get back things that were taken in the Hornbostel collection. And so if you like deep dives, then the Radical Readings usually tends to be a much deeper dive, in which there's more about the biographies of those involved, the history involved, some, theoretical analysis of those types of things. Oy. And so Fanachu, as you can see, Fanachu has lots of things to offer. And we look forward to, in 2024, shifting things up a bit, mixing things up, adding new different types of content. But I do just want to remind everybody that hamyo muna posible todo este. Like I produce Fanachu, I'm usually the host, but I am supported by a group of people who do a number of different jobs and tasks, creating all sorts of different things. And I'm only able to support them because of the support that Fanachu receives through our patrons. And so for those of you who are able, por favor, check out our Patreon page. Remember that you do get free shirts and free stickers by signing up. But yes, Fanachu started off about 7 years ago or so with just a group of volunteers, including myself, who just wanted to do a podcast to start talking about decolonization. And when you look now, Fanachu has almost 300 episodes. 7 years later, we've uploaded more than 230 Chamorro songs to YouTube. We've put out more than 200 alternative exclusive patron content episodes. It's Lanya. We have done a lot. And so, and Giminagahit, it is because of those who support. And so, por favor, Engencina, if you are able to support, por favor, sign up to donate on Patreon. All right. Este ha para pogo se dus masinaina en ekongokzu para este state of the podcast episode para Fanachu. Adios. Este ki ochubiai.